It's Friday, Geeks, and you are watching another edition of the Friday Night Geek Show. My name is Dante D, and welcome to the channel where we talk about comic books and other geek stuff. With me tonight is a writer who's rather new to the comic scene. We have Jason Douglas, who is the writer and creator of a new comic book, which you actually can purchase right now. And this comic book is called Parallel. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me on. It is my honor to be here. I'm excited. Let's have some fun.
Absolutely. So let's just get right into it. Let's just show everybody the book. Let's show everyone the book, the Parallel book.
Absolutely. So this is Parallel. This is my very first comic. That's my name down there. I wrote it in the bottom there. I'm very excited about this. It's a 64-page one-shot graphic novel from Source Point Press. You can get a little hint about what the book is about here, even by this fantastic cover art by Adam Ferris, my artist. That kind of division down the middle there, giving you hints about some of the stuff that our main character Landon's going to go through, and the sci-fi twist about there being another one of him out there, kind of tempting him. But yeah, there's the cover of my book right there.
Very cool. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, actually, because we were chatting yesterday when we kind of did a little bit of dry run, and you have a very, very interesting story, very interesting background. It's really cool how you kind of got into all of this. So how did you get into comic books?
Well, I'm assuming that, like most of the people who are tuning in right now or watching this later, you know, comics were a big part of my youth, a big part of my reading habits as a kid. And a pretty eclectic taste when I was young. I mean, I did the Marvel and DC thing. I'm of an age where the enhanced cover thing, the foil cover thing blew up right then. Image blew up right when I was a kid. But I was a Valiant kid too. I read all those vintage Valiant titles. Like my pull list at my local shop was every single Valiant title, and I would like ride my bike up there, and apparently was not smart enough to take a backpack with me, because me biking back like the 4 miles was with the brown paper bag with the books in it on the handlebar. So like a huge comic fan, just not a very smart one, I don't think. About my mid-teen years, I did that also fairly typical for a lot of people thing where my interest kind of waned and I took like a hiatus, right? I like walked away from comics for I think like 9 years. I mean, in fact, the only 2 books that followed me through that hiatus and like I hung on to it and reread were Neil Gaiman's Sandman and Art Spiegelman's Mouse. So like some pretty hefty, weighty stuff. But then sometime in my 20s, I got right back in, and like the that you know, my obsessive nature, I like when I dove back in, and have been reading and collecting again ever since. But you know, comics have been a part of my life for a long time, and I've always been such a big fan. And there was always kind of this dream in the back of my head of someday making one. But like so many of our hopes and dreams, it was there'll always be time, or how do you even do that? So kind of in the back of my brain always, and very rarely the thing that I was like, you know, going to jump on. And how this came about was in a very roundabout way, right? This is not me writing and trying and scrapping it or false starts along the way. This is like my first script and my first shot at something. And what happened was, you know, I did what my day job is. For the last couple of decades, I've been a public school teacher. And through that, and through kind of a secondary love of mine, which is theater, I started running in the elementary school that I worked in, and then in the middle school I worked in, I started running like drama clubs, and we had zero budget, so I couldn't buy the 4th and 5th graders a play for us to put on. I couldn't buy the middle schoolers a play for us to put on. So I said, well, I guess the logical thing is I will write one myself. And so I started writing plays and skits for these kids, and got a couple published, and we put a bunch of them on, and it was a lot of fun, really challenging, but it actually turned into almost like an 11-month-a-year second job between the writing of the play all summer, the pre-production, we would do a theater boot camp, and then rehearsals and practices and auditions, and then putting it on. And I would take like a month and a half off every spring and not think about it, and then start the process over again. And I did this for several years. And then just this one summer, a small handful of summers ago, I just made this decision. I said, well, as much as I love this, the dream, the impetus, the thing that I'm even more passionate about has been comics. So this summer, I am not going to write a play. I'm just going to write a comic. And honestly, it's funny. Like, it sounds kind of like brash and bold that I would say it that way, and it is, but not in a way of true confidence, knowing I could do it, but complete and utter misplaced confidence, because I had written these plays, I had written these skits, I had some success with that, and I truly thought, well, if I can do that, I mean, how hard could a comic be? Oh, little did I know. But it was that decision to kind of set that thing aside once and then finally pursue the dream that led me to actually writing this script.
Absolutely. And before we I move on to the next question, I just want to welcome some people that are rolling in. We have Louis joining us tonight from Studio Fitness, who's joining us all the way from Scotland this evening. And it's
Louis, Scotland. Yeah. I love it. Fantastic. Welcome.
And Adrian Benningfield, who is here every single week watching the live streams, and is a great participant in all these live streams. So now, you're one of those people, probably one of the few people that turn their hobby almost into like a semi-job, because everybody who reads comic books at one point or another thinks like, I think I could do that. And I'm going to try doing that. But there's only a small percentage that actually ever make it. So I guess what drove you to do this? I know you had writing experience, but like, what was the inspiration? Why did you want to do that?
Right. So that's where, and I'm sure we'll get into this in a little bit, but that's where it really dovetails. It's funny because like thematically, what Parallel's about at its core really kind of runs, excuse the pun, parallel with the inspiration for the story, right? So one of the main underlining themes of the book is the existential dread that kind of creeps up on a lot of us, I think, with the passing of time, and the idea that time does not slow down, that time does not stop, and the dreams and the hopes and the things that you think you're going to accomplish and you hope to accomplish at a certain age or by a certain age. It's very easy for you to wake up 5 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later, and those dreams of your youth they've been on hold so long that they're maybe not even there anymore. And I, like a lot of people out there, felt that kind of creeping thing for a long time. Now, let's be honest, I'm definitely old enough and did this, hobby / dream become reality project much later. So clearly, even though I'm feeling that stress and that anxiety and that creeping crawl of time, it wasn't enough for me to act on it, right? It's the inspiration thematically for the story, but it wasn't enough to kind of push it over the edge. Where my comic fandom comes in contact with writing the story then becomes the sci-fi twist of it all, right? And I'm sure we'll get into that too, but the parallel worlds idea of there's another version of you out there who did live that life that you left behind when you made your practical or not so practical, or easier or not so easier choices. But really the catalyst, what kind of kicked it into gear, kind of dovetails nicely with what my job is. Like I mentioned, the day job of a public school teacher, I've been doing that job long enough where I have students who are now and fairly recently have become like the age that Landon is in the book, right? Like pushing 30.
Right.
And it was actually conversations with a couple of former students who were literally in the same place that I put Landon in the book of, hey, when I was 22, like forever was in front of me, right? And I knew that I was going to, I'm thinking of one student in particular, I knew that I was going to end up dancing in a studio in Chicago. I knew that I was going to end up making art or going to New York and pursuing something on the stage, right? And yet they're at this point now at like 28, 29, whatever, where they're like, what happened? Like, I took that job because I had to pay rent next month, right? I
Right.
got in that relationship because of course I would. It's what was right there, right then. And suddenly 5 years go by, 6 years go by, and Chicago seems forever away, and New York is no longer beckoning, and you have aged out of something, and those dreams deferred become way more daunting, and maybe they'll never happen. And so like those kind of three things converging, my own kind of existential dread about time passing and not accomplishing this thing that had always been in my brain but never never acted on. My love of comics itself to frame what is really kind of like a dark internal psychological story in something, you know, that only comics can do, and wrap it in a bunch of, you know, very fun sci-fi parallel world wrapping paper. And then the catalyst of these former students just saying, man, I'm having my quarter life crisis right now. I'm past that myself, but I'm having this quarter life crisis right now, and I'm like living this, and that was a snap. And then, you know, time lined up, and the thing that I told you about, you know, not writing a play that summer, and I just started writing the story.
Absolutely, and you're not the only one past your quarter life crisis. We have Christopher Johnson here, who just popped in along with Invisa Boy. Christopher Johnson is saying, "I wish I was pushing 30. My old ass is pushing 50. But guess what? Keep on going, right? That's all you really can do, right?" And so I just wanted to kind of put parallel into context for the viewers a little bit.
Sure.
So Jason was actually kind enough to share his comic with me, and I was reading through it. So basically, parallels. The basic premise of it is there's a guy named Landon, and he had these dreams of becoming a rock star. Then he meets this girl, and it was a safe, comfortable relationship. They get together, they get married. Well, now all of Landon's hopes and dreams get pushed aside. His wife is this big executive VP at a young age, who was the youngest executive in the history of the company, right?
Yeah.
And she's a wee bit patronizing and controlling, and that kind of gets Landon to kind of reevaluate his life in a very most interesting way, right? And it's a very human story. I would have to say it's if you're looking for like superheroes and things like that, it's not really a superhero comic per se. It's a very human story, and that's the one thing I liked about it, because, you know, I think we all at some point can identify it. Everyone talks about, you know, the midlife crisis, but I think one thing that kind of gets swept under the rug all the time is the quarter life crisis, like you were saying. I think we all kind of go through that, because, you know, when you're 18, 19, 20, early 20s, you know, the world is your oyster. Like you said, you have the world ahead of you. Now you're pushing 30, or you're in your 30s, and you're like, wow, all these things that I wanted to do, you know, and all my dreams, you know, they kind of got pushed aside because, you know, life hits, you know. So it's you know, let me know in the comments here if you've kind of felt that, because I know I felt that. Have you personally gone through that?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I was really, really conscious of, and I know we talked about like what you think about when you and I were talking yesterday. We talked about like what's in your mind when you're actually typing the words of a comic script, and there's a lot going on. But one of the things that I was trying to be hyper aware of throughout the entire writing of all 64 pages was this idea that when you feel, whether you feel it as depression or stress or anxiety, right? The idea of dreams deferred, the idea of time passing, the idea of letting things go for reasons that at the time seemed practical or seemed easier. What, it doesn't even matter. You know, your experience is your own. And I was very aware that there's this great irony in that, because you experience that alone. Your experience is your experience, and that internal, whatever way that manifests for you, tends to be very isolating. It tends to be very much like a thing that you feel only you are going through. And the great irony is, just about all of us have gone through one version of that or another at some point in our life, or continually. So like there's another kind of layer there, because comic reading tends to be a very solo process as well, right? And so
Right.
like I mean, one of the things I really, really wanted, and some of my favorite feedback that I've gotten from the book so far is like the people who read it alone go through what a Landon is going through mostly alone, and connect with that and go, oh, I know exactly. I mean, my dream deferred was not musician, right? My dream deferred was writing. My dream deferred was dance. My dream deferred was I wanted to start a podcast. You know, like whatever it is. You know, one of my goals was like that universal thing. Even though the irony is we tend to feel very alone in this universal experience that so many of us have.
Absolutely. Now, you know, and the thing I'm sure that a lot of people are wondering, because like I said, we've all thought about creating comic books at one point or another, is
Right.
okay, so you're sitting there, boom, you're writing this comic, right? I think everybody who has the desire or the need to write something, they do it out of some sort of inspiration or because they feel like they have this story to tell. I don't think anybody actually sits down and writes because they think, oh, I'm going to make so much money off of this. And if that's what you're thinking, you're writing for the wrong reasons, because you're going to get a sad disappointment, right?
Yeah.
But you know, you were one of those few people who actually got through and you had a completed product. So for those that are maybe watching and actually have a completed product, you know, what do you do after that? So what did you do?
So again, I'm not necessarily the best example for this, but it happened, so it is an example. I you know, I think you and I talked about this yesterday as well. I got very lucky, but you've got to be careful not to put it all in luck, because I worked really hard on this too. And I love your point about this is not about getting rich, right? I had a story that I needed to tell. I had a dream that I had put off for way too long, and then I had inspiration to do it. It was something I wanted to do. The money doesn't play into it, especially not in indie comics. Let's be honest, right? It's no longer 1989 to 1992 where you're making $1 million off. Like even people at Marvel and DC are not making that money anymore.
Right.
So I think something that made the writing of this very special was I wrote it because it's my first one. I wrote it very much in a bubble. And what I mean by that is I wrote the first half of this, the first 32 pages, without any plan, certainly without any publisher, and certainly without any kind of conscious, this is the next step, right? It was literally the thing you're talking about. It was like the pure, I guess, not to sound pretentious, but like an artistic impulse to create this thing that was burning a hole in my brain. Okay, that was it. Now, when I got to that halfway point, when I literally got to the 32 pages typed up, I started thinking about, okay, well, now what do you do with this? Because like before I start writing more, I mean, hey, if this whole thing is about like time passing, I had spent a good deal of time on this. Time is precious, you know. I've got kids of my own, and the next school year was about to start, and I've got to decide what do I do next? Do I keep going? I mean, is there a way to put this into the world, or is this just going to be something for me? So in my kind of naivety, lack of knowledge or whatever, I did what we do in the 21st century, and I Googled it, and I looked online, and I started looking at publishing companies and what their submission policies were. And it was daunting, would be a kind way to put it. A little intimidating would be another way to put it. And if I'm being really honest, a bit discouraging too, because most companies do not have open submission policies, right? And even the ones that do, it's pretty artist-centric. They do not want your script. At most, if they want something typed, it's like a pitch with art attached. And that is, nobody wants my art, certainly. Nobody wants to see that. So the less said about that, the better. And while it was discouraging as an experience, I think my lack of knowledge, right, my naive standpoint actually shielded me there too. I was like, well, I guess that's maybe not how you do it, right? There's a bit of a thing where my lack of knowledge about how comics were made in the 21st century, and how so much of it is crowdsourced and Kickstarter funds and kind of self-published, or at least started from that framework and then maybe goes to a publisher. My lack of knowledge of that, I think, protected me again, because I didn't go that route next. Honestly, I don't know if I would have had the time and the effort and the willpower at the point I was at that point in the summer to do it anyway. So the next thing I did was, well, it's very archaic. This whole thing is very archaic, right? Like, you can like see me hunting and pecking away there, like what does Google say? And then, oh, that doesn't look good. So what do? Well, you actually physically start handing it to publishers, which is not what you do, but what I thought do, because I'm still apparently living as a 12-year-old reading comics from a couple decades earlier. And I actually printed out hard copies of that first 32 pages and a cover letter and character bios and story beats for the rest of it, and put it in. I actually went, I went into my classroom and got, this is so ridiculous. I got like the classroom manila folders, like the file folders. You know what I'm talking about. And put them in each one and opened up my desk drawer and got out cute little color paper clips and put it all together, and made these little packets, and stapled a nice graphic to the front. I mean, literally, it's from decades in the past how I'm going about this. And I took it to my local con. I took it to Motor City Comic Con with the plan of, I've got a little stack of these, and as soon as I see a booth that looks like a small publisher, I was going to walk up to them and say something, right?
Right.
And I got, here is where the cosmic comic gods or kismet or karma or luck or whatever you want to call it came into play, because the first booth I saw that met that criteria was this gorgeous booth, and it was the Source Point Press booth, which is big and fantastic. If you've ever seen it at the show, they are amazing. And I start walking towards it, and my eyes lock on one individual. I'm looking at the people behind the tables. And for no other reason, I go to this one individual, basically because he has got the most luxuriant, beautiful red beard you've ever seen in your life. Just like this, I mean, he could have been like out of Norse mythology. And I was
Game
like,
of Thrones or something.
Yeah, that's the guy. I'm like, that's the guy I'm going to go talk to. Again, cosmic whatever. That's Travis McIntyre. That's the co-founder, president, and editor-in-chief of Source Point Press. That's the dude who I walk up to just randomly, like the cold call of all cold calls, right? And I'm like, hello, and I hand him the thing, and he's like looking at me strange. I don't know why he's looking at me strange, and we talk it through, and he's flipping through this stuff, and he's like, I kind of like the cut of your jib. Like, I don't think you know what you're doing here, but this is great. Are you trying to pitch me a comic in 1971? And I'm like, this is what I thought you needed to do. And he likes it, and he takes it back that night, reads it that night, tells me to come back and see him the next day. And like, we're in business. And he says, okay. I'm like, well, because I thought that first 32 pages was like a first issue. And I thought there was like a couple issues after that. And he goes, nope, it's a one shot. It's 64 pages. It's a small graphic novel. We like the price point on that. You can go home and write me another 32 pages, right? And I said, absolutely, I can, having no idea if I could. My analogy to that is like when an actor is on an audition and they're like, you have the job because you can ride a horse, right? And the actor says, yes, I can ride a horse. They've never even seen a horse. That kind of, I was just like, yes, I can do that. I'm on top of that. And I go home and go, I don't even know what let's figure this out. And so I took it straight there. And on my first time out, like lightning strike, like I got a publisher, which is amazing. And SourcePoint is one of the most amazing indie companies to work for. They're on the rise. I mean, they're growing. They're putting out somewhere between 7 to 10 books in previews every single month.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and cut their teeth on the con circuit. Like they were an established presence on the con circuit. That's where they did their business. That's where they cut their teeth. That's where they grew. And so like the expanding now and their game wing is blowing up. Their board game wing is blowing up. And the best part of it is it's still a family. Mm-hmm. Like from like the people that I've met and the people I've gotten to hang out with and the help that I've gotten, the love and the support, it is no matter how much bigger they've gotten, especially for teeny tiny small press, it is the most supportive and nurturing family environment that I could have hoped for. It's been amazing.
Yeah, and that's great to hear because, you know, the comic book business, much like most of the entertainment business, it can be a dirty business at times. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's really great to hear. And I just wanted to address some of the comments here. People are really loving your story, by the way. Christopher Johnson absolutely loves your story. And Christopher's also asking what your day job is. Jason's a high school teacher. So
middle school, almost high
sorry,
school.
Middle school.
I
Okay.
send them to high school.
Oh, you
when
send
I'm
them to
done
high
with
school.
them, they go off prepared.
So he has some writing background. And Adrian Benningfield, I thought this was an interesting comment. He says, it's interesting Jason brought up crowdfunded series for new comics. Even older comic book creative people have tried it. Mark Silvestri did it with Cyberforce. I actually remember Cyberforce when I was actively buying new comic books every single week. I remember that was like a free book that they were handing out to people. Have you actually checked that out at all, or? Oh, I think we lost. Did we? Oh, sorry. I think we lost you for a second there. Can you hear me?
Am I back?
Okay, you're back. You're back. Okay, I think.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, we lost you there for a second. But yeah, you know, like Mark Silvestri, he was one of the greats. You know, from the '90s, one of the rock star artists. You heard stories about this guy getting so many royalties from his books. He had like a Porsche, his house in Malibu, like all this, and you know, even he had to resort to crowdfunding at one point. So I think it's really interesting that that you brought that up. Oh, I think I think we're losing. I think we lost Jason here again. Your guest will need to connect their mic or cam before you can add. Okay, something happened. Okay, so it looks like I'm going solo for a bit here. Hope you all like my face for this evening. So yeah, so Parallels is an absolutely amazing book. I think you should all check it out. It was actually solicited in previews back, I think it was in early January, and then what ended up happening was the world situation, and I don't think I'm allowed to say it just based on YouTube guidelines, but we all know what happened, and now things have kind of gotten delayed, but you are able to pick it up now, if I'm not mistaken, and I think we still don't have Jason. I will keep an eye out for Jason here. No problem. So the indie comic scene, it's just an amazing scene nowadays, because like Jason said a little earlier, we have. Oh, is he coming up to us? Oh, here we go. You're back.
So, am I back on?
You are back on.
Okay, so do you remember when you and I connected and we talked last night, and
yeah.
And we had the lovely little moment where your son was popping up in the background.
Right.
I was talking about my son behind the wall playing guitar.
Yeah.
My son, the lovely young teenager that he is, knew that I was doing this and decided to call and interrupt anyway several times. So that was literally the phone saying you're not allowed to do two things at once. So I sincerely apologize, and I'm sure my son does too, because we all know teenagers, one of their first instincts is to feel really bad when they make a mistake and apologize for it and own up to the responsibility of it. Yes, absolutely,
for sure. Yeah, it's actually you know what? Believe it or not, it actually happens a little bit more than you think.
Yeah.
I've lost connection with people a lot of times, and then I just have to improvise. Hello, you're on the spot now. So I don't know, guys. How do you think? Do you think I improvised okay? Let me know.
Oh, I heard a little bit of it. I heard you talking about how crazy like the release was, and how it got spread out over months instead of
Did I get it right?
Yeah, I think so. So yeah, it was kind of crazy because I mean it was in previews, right? Parallel was in previews, which was, oh my god, talk about like the fan of me. That was a thrill. Like that was one of the big moments of just like blowing my mind from the fan perspective. Like when you flip open that magazine, which is like has been my magazine for years now, of like, this is what's coming up and this is what I'm interested in. There's my guy, and there's that artist that I like. She's amazing, and all that stuff. And then like my book was in there, and that was pretty amazing. Though I will tell you this. This is kind of funny. Apparently this happens all the time, or I was told this happens all the time, but it still freaked me out. In the couple days before Previews ships the hard copy to shops, it's like that month's books, you can see them on the Diamond website. And I go in there and look. It's like Googling yourself, kind of, I think. And I go in there to look. Is it there? Is it there? And I look, and my heart, you know that thing where your heart sinks and you get the hot flash and the cold flash, like back and forth, like it's like the worst of both worlds, because they not only spelled the name of the book wrong, they spelled my name wrong, and it was like it was like Jason, like dual gas, and yeah, dual gas, I believe is how it was spelled, and it was like there was like the L's were all out of order and parallel, and
which is weird because Douglas is a common enough name, right?
Like it's like it's not even anyway. It was like oh no, because you couldn't. There wasn't a way to find it. Like if you tried to type in the title of the book, you couldn't find it. If you tried to type in my name, you couldn't find it. And so like Josh Werner, who is the other co-founder of SourcePoint, and has an uncanny ability to write a very professional but very stern letter when needed, took care of that right away. And so like by the time everything kind of shook out, it was more or less okay again. But opening it up there in Previews, it was amazing. And it was supposed to hit comic shops that last week of April, the last Wednesday before Free Comic Book Day. Okay.
Yeah.
And so like I've got signings lined up and the cons and all this stuff and all these events and pre-release, and there was a variant that we were going to promote and all this stuff. And then, Diamond shut down. And because especially in those first couple of months of quarantine, the comic industry was just spinning their wheels, right? Like it was very unknown as what was going on and how it was going to work and what was going to come next. So when SourcePoint actually got their copies of the book in from their warehouse in California, they actually shipped it out to the stores that had ordered directly from them, and from the customers that had ordered on the website. They shipped it out like a week or two early. So some people got it before they were supposed to get it. And then the Diamond copies that most of the shops ordered from didn't come in until a couple months after that, until Diamond was up and running again. And then obviously their priority was a little bit more DC and Marvel books. Well, actually DC was doing the thing, but getting the bigger, the Image books out and stuff like that. But it came in a couple of months later. So I got to kind of experience reactions to the book in waves. And now, once it's gotten a little bit of traction, like you can still order it. Diamond and SourcePoint are doing reorders. Like you can walk into, it's kind of cool because you can walk into your local comic book shop right now and support local business, like the brick and mortar, because a lot of those shops struggled for a lot of months there.
Right.
And all you got to do is go up there, and all you got to know is the Diamond order code. So like if you tell them FEB 20 1983, which is easy to remember because that's Return of the Jedi year. FEB 20 1983, they'll order you a copy. And you can always go to sourcepointpress.com as well and get it there, and their shipping rates are really reasonable. So like there's still copies out there, and you can go get it. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And why don't you show, for those of us that are just joining us, why don't you show them the book again, the regular cover. There are also variant covers, actually. So here it is. Yeah.
So that's the regular cover, which is it's really a stunning cover. One of my favorite bits of feedback from people are like, because here's the other thing, come and follow me on Instagram, because I am not a famous person. And what that means is you come and follow me on Instagram, and you reach out and you've got a question or you want to give me feedback or whatever.
He'll respond.
I will respond. I will respond to you. In fact, there have been people who are like, okay, I've got to go now. Thank you for all those answers, but you need to stop talking because I've got to go, like, to bed or something. I'm like,
right.
Yeah, I'll talk all night.
Yeah.
one of my favorite things is like, you come and follow me on Instagram, and if you get this book, what I want you to do is I want you to take a picture of you with the book and send it to me, and I will blast it out there and send some traffic your way and give you a big shout out. And there's like these people who were, there's that purple theme going on here, and there's people who will like match their outfit with it or like do a background. I'm like, that is really, really cool. So yeah, that's the regular cover. And then this is another one of those things where like the nerd in me just could not believe it. From like when Adam Ferris, the artist, sent me those first pages, when I got to watch Justin Birch, the letter a few pages, when I saw it in previews, there's all these moments that like the 12-year-old in me just couldn't, like almost couldn't process it. But the collector nerd in me, oh boy. When Sanctum Sanctorum Comics and Oddities, which has a really big online presence, got a shop near me too, created this variant cover.
That's a great cover.
This Garner cover.
That to me, yeah.
Which is that broken glass for the two different landings, the other land and the parallel land and our land. And I was just like, oh my goodness gracious. So they only made 100 of these. There's only a few of them left. You can still get a hold of these. Sanctum Sanctorum Comics and Oddities, you can order directly from there. I've got a link in my bio at Instagram, which is just at J Douglas Writes. Come see me over there. But like, there's a few of these left. And then, if that wasn't enough, another shop, State of Comics in Plymouth, made this variant. It's an Esteban variant. You've seen his work around. It's like a Donnie Darko homage cover. And then check it out. Like, see the guitars.
Yeah,
for the bunny ears. So that's cool. A trade dress variant that sold out. That sold out in less than 48 hours. There was 200 of them, and they just went away.
Wow.
They pop up on eBay. They pop up on eBay every once in a while, which is another nerd out thing. Like, I'm like, oh my god, I'm on eBay. I mean, that doesn't help me at all, but like, yeah. We just gave away 2 of them directly through SourcePoint. SourcePoint gave one away, and then they had me give away one on Instagram. From them, and then they even made a 3rd variant, which is the same cover, but this is the throwback to the early 90s. It is a virgin foil variant of the same cover.
Beautiful. I love those foil covers.
The store gifted me one of those. Those sold out in less than 48 hours, and these pop up on eBay for a little bit more. And then he had a couple of them slabbed, and that's what that looks like. So that's pretty impressive.
Look at that, Jason. You are now immortalized. Your name is going to be
it's really weird. It's really weird.
Yeah.
That one, because it's funny because like, even if you this is the thing that should help people realize, and certainly helps me realize, that no matter what you accomplish in your life, and no matter how big we put somebody that we appreciate their work or whatever, how high we put them on a pedestal, they're still just a normal person. Like, the most famous actor in the world is still just a normal person, because as even if I gave into the temptation when this thing existed and I put it in my hands, that like, oh well, that makes me something. There's something that happened 5 minutes later where I had to, clean a toilet or something, or, one of my kids was whining about whatever. So like, all that goes away. I'm here to tell you that whatever that thing, never let it go to your head. Nobody is better than anybody else. There's always something to bring you back down to earth. But it was just quite an honor to not only, get to live out my dream here, but have there's 3 variants. Are you kidding me? It's pretty cool.
No, that is amazing, and congratulations on the success of the books. It sounds like you're doing very well with it. And we have a few people that are just rolling in here too. We have Lovell Lucas Jr., who's a very active subscriber on the channel. He wants to know how to order them. I know you mentioned that, but do you mind repeating that again? And then Christopher Johnson saying he's ordering one right now. So he wants me to put a link to the order, please.
You got it. So I said this before, but you got to promise me something. You order a book, come over and see me on Instagram, say hello, let me know, and then you got to make a promise to me. As soon as that sucker arrives, I want a picture of you with the book, and I will give you a shout out on Instagram and send people your way too. Okay, I like doing that. It's fun, and it's so cool seeing people get that. But it is so easy to order right now. Okay, There's 3 really easy ways to do it. There is a chance, because it's in the world, there's a chance that you walk or call your LCS. You go to your brick and mortar store, they may have it, okay? If they got it, great. If they don't, you can order it through them, all right? You can go up to the counter and you can say, I'm looking for this book. You say Parallel, you say my name, you say SourcePoint Press or whatever, but all you got to do is tell them the diamond order code, which is FEB20 1983, okay?
Return of the Jedi.
Return of the Jedi, 1983.
Yeah.
FEB20 1983. Tell them that, they'll order one. If for whatever reason, I wouldn't know why a comic shop wouldn't want your business, but if they said no for whatever reason, or you don't have an LCS, right? If you don't have one that you can go to safely, like whatever your situation is, just go to www.sourcepointpress.com, search for it there, and it's there. They've even got digital copies there now, which is even lower price, and their shipping for the hard copy is really reasonable too, and they're really good about that. So really 3 easy ways to do that. Obviously with the 2 sold out variants, those are like, I mean, if you want to do the aftermarket thing and try to find one on eBay, that's okay. I am thinking about doing a signed copy of this giveaway coming up pretty soon, and maybe a signed copy of my 1 copy of the sold out variant. This variant, there's a couple copies left. If you go to Instagram, there's a direct link in my bio for one of those. There's only a few left, so get those before they become an eBay thing as well. But it's still really easy to get. And I'll tell you this, here's my favorite thing about Indie Comics. No, this is my favorite thing about supporting Indie Comics. Mm-hmm. Your dollar goes so much further. And this is not me getting on a high horse about not buying DC, Marvel, Image, Dark Horse, because I still do. It's not that. But you do have to understand that, like, there's a major drop off after the big 2, and then after some of the larger, smaller publishers. Okay. And the blood, sweat, and tears that go into Indie Comics, and this is me telling you from experience, from going through a multi-year process to get 1 book out there, and how much effort and time and love goes into that. Your dollar goes so much further if you find an indie book that you like, or a company that you appreciate, like SourcePoint. Every time, you're not only getting the pleasure out of it that you're getting out of it, you are literally putting food on people who work for that company's plates, right? Yeah. Like it's like, 1 copy of this is like buying 100 copies of a Marvel book, like as far as like the dent that makes and what that means to the creator's bottom line and the company's bottom line. And if you can buy through local comic shops, it means that much more. In those early months of quarantine, SourcePoint, for as much as they were struggling as a small publisher to stay afloat and do all the things that they needed to do to keep everybody in business, they did one of the most amazing things. And this is testament, if you heard me say this before, about how it runs more like a family than it does even a business, and how much that has impressed me over the last couple of years. They did this amazing thing. They had a retailer relief program. So they were running some sales on the site. You go in there and you buy your stuff, and they ship it to you, which was also one of the advantages of being an indie publisher during those first few months of quarantine. Marvel wasn't shipping books, right? When Diamond shut down, that was it until they started whatever again. You could get your comics from indie publishers then just directly through them. So that was kind of cool. But anyway, in those first few months, they did this retailer relief program. So every time you placed an online order, at checkout, there was a screen where you could type in the name of your local comic shop, your brick and mortar shop that might have been shuttered and struggling at the time. And 25% of your order total went directly as a cash kind of bailout to your shop. And wow. So here's literally a small business supporting as many small businesses as they could, yeah. Because not only do they have the family mentality in their own publishing wing and gaming wing, they know how tight knit and how interconnected, like almost like a food web, all those levels of comic books are. And it's not just out of survival, like it's out of love. Like Source Point loves their local comic shops, you know. And I just thought that was like a kind of a beautiful and really kind of awesome thing that they did during that time. So another reason to kind of support Source Point is because they might have been out there helping your local comic shop stay afloat in a time where they were struggling in an unprecedented way.
Absolutely. Now, there are two more things that I wanted to talk about before we wrapped up. Little earlier, Chris Johnson, he's very, very active tonight.
Let's go, Chris.
Was wondering if the indie comic scene is as ripe now as it was in the mid 1980s. What do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, like, okay, so I can speak to what I know about stuff now. I can speak to what I know historically about stuff then. I mean, it's drastically different, right? I mean, that is like the indie comic boom of the mid 80s, really early 80s, you know, Dave Simmons, Cerebus, and then you've got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and you've got, you know, everything down from, God, what was that one black and white that I owned when I was a kid about a gerbil hamster ninja guy? Anyway.
Well, I know what you're talking about, but I don't know what it's called. Someone else was talking about that not too long ago, actually.
so like that was like the birth of that idea of self-publishing. There are, and that was like a boom and bust. It didn't last very long. This is, in some ways, I mean, there is a lot of boom and bust, but it's sustainable in a slightly different way. The quality is up. The variety is up, right? Like the kinds of stories that can be told and the kinds of stories that you can find out there. You've got niche publishers that do just this kind of thing. And if you can think about it, there's probably somebody publishing a book out there. The biggest difference is you're going to call anybody who's even self-publishing a book this time like Indie Comics. And that is the vast majority of books that exist in the world, right? Like if you think of it as like a pyramid, and Marvel and DC are at the top for reasons. The vast majority of those bottom rungs are people who self-finance, right, through crowdsourcing, and then put it out there in the world on their own, right? Mostly digital too. That seems to be a big chunk as well. But like, there's it's funny because we're living in a time where the death of paper publishing, whether it be newspapers or magazines or even comics to a slightly lesser extent, is like a front line or a front page news story, right? It's like the dwindling of print media on all levels. And yet at the same time, there's kind of a golden age going on right now for smaller publishers and indie comics. Now, I'm not saying it's just like you go out there and you hit the ground and oil comes up, or you find gold in the river like immediately. I mean, there's just as many times where, you know, you incorporate and you put out one book and that's it, or you have a semi-successful Kickstarter and you put it out there and then it's over. But like, there's just so much good stuff out there, and people really the huge difference is the tools are more accessible. I mean, it's the microcosm of the macrocosm of the 21st century, right? Because the internet exists, because anybody can contact a printer in a way that you necessarily couldn't in the 80s, right? Because anybody can get on this website that is literally there to help fund your dream in a way that you couldn't in the 80s. It's a very different animal, but the spirit of it, right? The creating for creation's sake, I've got a vision that I don't necessarily want to compromise on, right? The editorial mandate of Marvel saying, sorry, Jean Grey is alive and the Phoenix Force is a separate thing. Like, you don't necessarily have to do that, right? Another thing that I love about indie comics is the fact that, well, let me say this. The thing that I love about comics the most is I truly believe they are the most malleable and forgiving type of storytelling out there. I don't think that there's a type of story you can't tell in comic form. They take the best of prose, they take the best of film, and they do things that neither of the other can do. I don't think that there's a limit. I don't think there's a ceiling or a basement that says you have to within this box. I think if there's a story you can think of from the smallest personal stories to the biggest wide-scoping epic stories. You can tell that very effectively in comics. That's why I love comics. I love indie comics because for all the limitations that indie comics have with they don't have the infrastructure of Marvel and DC, the 80 years of infrastructure to get something printed and out there and to the masses, right? They don't have the financial infrastructure that Marvel and DC does. For those limitations, they also don't have the limitations of Marvel and DC, right? There isn't you've got to sell copies next month. So it's not, I mean, one of my favorite things, again, one of my favorite bits of feedback that I've gotten about Parallel so far are the people who are like, I went back and read it again because I got to the ending and it made me think that it happened, that it ends this way, but I wasn't sure. And I went back and read it again, and there's clues in the art and it's very readable. You know, there's a bit of a limitation when you're doing this monthly. It's got to be, I got to sell so many copies next month and next month and next month. And the story's got to perpetuate forever because we need these characters to last 80 years because we need to keep the license alive. You don't have those constraints in indie comics. You don't have you can tell a superhero story, but you don't have to tell a superhero story, right? It's anything you want it to be. And another reason that I love indie comics probably right now above all others.
Absolutely. Now, there are just two questions here. Very quickly, Entertainment Time wants to know what your thoughts are on TMNT.
So I am of a very weird age. So I did not. Oh, God, my pop culture history is so weird because I did not have what Mark Maron on the WTF podcast calls, I did not have a guy. I did not have an older sibling. I did not have a cousin. I did not have cool parents. I didn't have the weirdo down the street who said, this is what you should be listening to. This is what you should be watching. This is what you should be checking out. I came to everything a little bit late. Okay. So I didn't really even start reading comics until I was like 12. I didn't realize that I loved, I didn't fall in love with Led Zeppelin until I was in high school. Right. But like once I found something, my OCD kicks in, my obsessive personality kicks in, and I want it all. But my age puts me at a point where because I got into comics late, I missed the first run of Turtles. And at my age, I watched some cartoon. I had a decent amount of toys, but I was just aging out. So I'm in this weird little thing where I knew I'm a Star Wars kid and I was a G.I. Joe kid, and I was just a tiny bit too late to comics to catch the Indie Comics Turtles, but just a tiny bit too old to get into the next animated wave. So it's never been one of my go-tos, but I appreciate the crap out of it. I love that I love its longevity. And I certainly appreciated it as one heck of a brand, but I kind of missed it on both sides by a little bit.
Right.
My little sister loved Turtles more than I did.
Yeah, I was like right in that era where Turtles was like booming with all the like cartoons and TV shows. So I loved Turtles. Now, Lovell Lucas Jr. is wondering. Well, first, I think he makes a good point here. Indie equals freedom to do your tale. Mainstream equals must follow protocol. And I think totally true, And then he's also wondering, in your opinion, Jason, what are some great indie comic story types? Horror, sci-fi, adventure, comedy?
All of the above. I mean, I think that's really my point is comics in general are not as a form of storytelling, they're not beholden to anything. I think like the comment I made before, they are the most malleable because you can do anything in them. There is no limit to storytelling. I think you have some more freedom to do that in indie comics, which is that comment before that. But like, you name it, right? Like if you, it doesn't even have to be a genre, right? I mean, like Parallel is on its surface a dark, twisted sci-fi tale, right? underneath it's existential dread and personal choice, and you're dealing with your own, past regrets and the possibility of a second chance that may not be there. I love the fact that if that list of genres that you just listed was 25 more, lists longer, yes, to all of them. They all work perfect.
Absolutely. And that's the one thing I think I found very interesting about Indie Comics in comparison to Marvel and DC. I have to admit, Indie Comics is a weakness of mine. On the channel, I talk a lot about Marvel and DC, but my knowledge base is very, very limited with Indie Comics. I have dabbled in it a little bit. And I think especially after talking to you, I have to dabble in it a little bit more, right? So, but that's the one thing I've really noticed is like you'll see indie comics kind of expanding their horizons. They don't limit themselves to superheroes. They go into like other genres, kind of like more like TV, right? So, yeah. Now, my last question for the evening before we wrap up is, what are you working on now? I'm sure everyone really wants to know what's coming next for Jason Douglas.
So I have my second project is a book that right now I'm hoping to be about 4 issues. It's called Jane American, and it has, while it's just as personal to me and has just as many kind of powerful underlying themes. This one a lot about race and gender, and hiding your true self. It does, my comic book nerd. I'm not wrapping it in a sci-fi construct this time. I am wrapping it in a superhero construct. And it is a post-World War II story. It takes place in 1946 in a small town in Michigan. And it's really about a young 15-year-old girl who is very much inspired by my late grandmother. And what happens when the real-life historical context of when everybody comes home from the war and African Americans are out of jobs and women are out of jobs, right? The people who kept things going during that war effort when the soldiers were in Europe and the Pacific. What happens when our 15-year-old girl, who also has manifested during the war some enhanced strength and some enhanced speed, when it gets triggered and manifests when she finds out that her dad dies in the war, like how do you survive in a world where you are so other, whether it's the color of your skin or your gender or the fact that you can do the work of 10 of these soldiers who come back and took your mom's job from the factory? Like, how do you deal with all of that when the world is clearly stacked, life is clearly stacked against you? It's very much inspired by some of the stuff that my grandmother actually went through. In fact, I'm super excited about this story because I've got a lot of personal family history in it. A lot of the story takes place in this factory that's a real factory in Plymouth, Michigan, that during the war got a contract. It was a wire factory. And during the war, it got a contract to make these things called Marston mats. And Marston mats, even if you don't know the name, you know what these are. They're these long sheet metal things with these holes punched in them that the Army Air Corps used to make the temporary runways in Europe and the Pacific. So, like, as long as you cleared some land, that's where they set up those runways. You didn't need to take over an enemy runway. You could set up your runway on any strip of land and take your planes off from there. And it turned out through some research, and I actually found this at the Historical Society before I confirmed with my family, my great-grandfather during the war worked in the factory.
Oh,
and it was only one of only 2 factories in the United States who kept their contract after the war, because they kept on making those because, like, Berlin Airlift and all the occupied countries and stuff like that. So they kept on making them even afterwards. But all the Rosalie Riveters went home. And there was actually, in the town just to the south, there was a housing development that is still there today under the same name. That was one of the first in southeastern Michigan, one of the first early suburban African American subsidized housing developments, where during the Great Migration, when there was that huge push up from the South to work in the factories, especially during World War II, that's where a lot of African American families lived. And I'm bringing a lot of that historical context and coming together and kind of the conflicts of now all those jobs are going back to the returning soldiers, and kind of how that plays out while our main character is still trying to hide the fact that she can probably do the work of 10 of these grown men. And it's a story that not only was inspired by my grandmother and real life kind of themes and even events, but again, my students were a catalyst to this, just like parallel, because, you know, I have done my entire teaching career, at least as a professional, in the 21st century. And we tend to vary, and maybe a little less so now, but we tend to, especially in the 21st century, think that a lot of that hiding of who you are, the unequal footing, depending on who you are, is a story of the past, right? Even if we're not quite here for everybody, we're a whole lot closer than we were. And yet, year after year, you know, students coming through my classroom, and whether it was based on race or religion or gender or sexual orientation or whatever it was that made them still different from whatever the norm was, watching them struggle with that and watching them suffer through that was again the catalyst, I think, for this story. Just like talking to some of those former students and them going through their quarter life crisis was the one of the catalysts for Parallel.
Very interesting, and I really look forward to reading. Was it American Jane, right?
Yeah, well, Jane American. So like a bit of a pun of like
Jane American,
plain Jane.
Yeah,
plain
Jane American.
Yes. Yeah.
So I myself very much look forward to reading it when it comes out, and I'm sure everybody else on the channel will pick it up when it comes out, and we will have you back on the show again for sure to talk about that, and even just to have you comment, get your opinion on some other things. You're very, very good talker. You're very articulate, so we'll definitely have to have you back.
Well, listen, my friend, like there is like I teach English to young teenagers, and grammar is boring. So one of my skills, if you can call it, is to try to convince them that they are not bored and they actually want to learn, parts of speech and poetry and commas, and it's not easy. So I have had to learn to talk a little bit and fill in those blank spots, just so they can't sit there and go, "Oh no, this is awful, I'm leaving." So
yeah. Exactly. An interesting fact, actually. Jason and I are probably less than 40-minute car ride away right now. He's in the Detroit area, and I'm actually in the Windsor area in Canada, just a bridge across, really. So
yeah,
when this interesting pandemic is over, we'll probably have to do beers one night for sure. So
sounds good, my friend.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening on the show. Everybody really, really enjoyed listening to your story and talk about Parallel. It was wonderful. Don't forget, one last time, pick up Parallel. It is a book by Jason Douglas, art by Adam Ferris.
Yeah.
And it's available right now. You can order it. Many different ways to order it. Just rewind a little bit, because I'm not going to try to go through all the methods you can order it. So just rewind a little bit, and you'll be able to pick it up. You also could follow Jason Douglas on Instagram. It's J Douglas Writes, correct? At J
Absolutely.
Douglas
Yeah. Come and see me. Give me a follow. Give me a shout out. Send me a picture with you in the book, and I will blast that out there and send people your way as well.
Perfect. And thank you all for joining us this evening. I love hanging out with you all. Every single Friday at 8 o'clock, you are all making the show. You are just as an important part of this show as anybody else, the guest, the host, whoever. Thank you so much for participating and being here every Friday. The channel and all of us, from the comic book collectors, creators, to myself, really, really appreciate it. So it's Friday Geeks. Let's go out and have some fun, and we will see you all in the next episode next week. See you later.